Good morning and welcome to Scotland Speaks at our usual time of 10 AM on a Saturday morning here in the studio, and we've had a lovely week of sunshine and much happening in politics. And on the subject of politics, women are not off the agenda. And let's just take a look at last week's show where we covered the ruling in the Supreme Court when we spoke to our National Women's Convener Kirsty Fraser and our National Equalities Convener Suzanne Blackley, where we've had a terrific response to the show. Over to a few clips from them.
So how did we get here was sheer stubbornness, I think, from a certain group of MSPs and lobby groups. And it's absolutely ridiculous that we did get here. And the cost to the Scottish taxpayer has been horrendous. And the fact that they've just continued, and they'll probably continue to, you know, we've seen Maggie Chapman sort of saying that she feels like nobody was included in the discussions. It's a Supreme Court. You don't have like a sit down to discuss it. So this is where we've ended up. The UK government yesterday accepted that is, they have to, I think I heard Keir Starmer say clarity more than I've ever heard the word used in my life. And this is now been proven, and that is the bottom line. And ultimately there's three things came from this. There's the legal definition, there's protecting trans rights, that's the thing, you know, they're still completely protected under the Equalities Act, and also it is going to confirm all legislation moving forward.
But the point is, we know that there have been hospitals that have not been providing single-sex spaces for care and even for their staff. What is this now going to mean?
Well, I mean, it just shows you how ridiculous things have come, that a hospital does not respect the Equality Act, which was put in place to protect and to promote the rights of people. That's what the fundamental reason for the Equality Act being written was, to protect people. And a hospital, somewhere where you should feel safe, is not protecting people. And to go back to what you asked Kirsty, this has all come about because of politicians not listening. We've seen it just recently with the assisted dying bill in Westminster. If you only invite people, if you go in there with a predetermined idea of what you want the result to be of something, and you only invite people in that agree with you on that, you are never going to create something that is going to, you know, that's going to have any substance.
Moving from women, over 50% of the population, we are now going to speak to ALBA Youth, an exceptionally important and pro-independence group in Scottish society. And ALBA Youth are blessed with three fantastic representatives who are joining me in the studio today. So we'll see you after the break. And I'm delighted to be joined in this week's show by three members of ALBA's Youth, Owen, Kristopher and Caitlin. Welcome to Scotland Speaks. In last week's show, we discussed women and our ALBA Women's Convener and ALBA Equalities Convener, and really just the plans for the party in terms of women and the various equality strands that we cover. So I thought it was very important to graduate further and talk about what young people in our party are doing, what your hopes and plans are for the future, and a bit about your engagement with Alex, with whom I'm presuming you all met at some point. Yes. Owen, you're just 17. You've got your first higher exam next week, but you've kindly come into the studio. Tell me, Owen, what inspired you to join ALBA, and when did you meet Alex, and what was the encounter like?
Well, what inspired me to join the ALBA party was its common sense strategy for independence via the list. So we could actually just get independence without having to go through the loops to try and get another referendum. I first met Alex when I was 16, and it was an event in the Salutations Hotel in Perth. I think it was before the general election, and you asked me and my friend at the time, still friend, a question about young people. And Alex Salmond was impressed with our answer, and then he wanted to meet us, and we got a photo took, and that was really nice.
This is great. So he was impressed with you rather than you being impressed with him. That's a great story. That's a great story. So you joined the party just after that, did you?
No, it was just before that.
Oh, just before that you joined the party. Okay. And Kristopher, of course, you're a candidate for the ALBA party in an upcoming by-election, which we'll come to a little bit later on in the programme. But what inspired you to join ALBA, and any stories about Alex you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I joined the ALBA party shortly after the 2021 Holyrood elections, just because at the time of the formation of the ALBA party I was an SNP member. I voted SNP 1, ALBA 2, because common sense.
So to be clear, you mean you voted SNP in the constituency ballot paper,
and then ALBA
and you voted
on the
ALBA
list,
on the list ballot,
which is the common sense viewpoint in my opinion, because it was two majorly pro-independence parties. If the SNP aren't going to get seats on the list, ALBA can get seats on the list, and that gives us a pro-independence sweep of the parliament, the supermajority, at which point gives us the mandate to collapse parliament and get the independence election. But it was the SNP hostility that actually done it for me. It was the we'll not work with anybody, we'll do it ourselves. It's like, well, but you've got a whole other group that don't like you or don't want to support you, that support this other group, and you've got grassroots movements that are falling out with it. And in my opinion, the way I seen it is ALBA the one that are willing to work with those groups, and that for me was enough to tip me over the edge going, nah, I'll join the ALBA party, because that's the one that actually has Scotland's interests at heart, and not just getting themselves elected into a parliament and getting their expenses up. That was essentially my viewpoint at the time. And then with my first encounter with Alex was, I've had a couple to be fair. I think the first proper one would have been at the Glasgow Independence March last year, where we actually had a chat. And the main description of Alex I've got is just one of the boys. Like, he's just a very happy guy. He was just always willing to engage with people, willing to talk, very happy with, himself, I suppose, and everyone around him. He just gave off a very good impression. That convinced my brother to join the ALBA party. That's when my brother David met him as well.
Okay.
So it was...
So positive interaction, and with Alex, and an understanding of how we need the electoral system to work to advantage of the independence movement, which you saw. And of course, you know that Alex extended the hand to the SNP to say, we'll work with you because the main goal is independence and it has to be. Caitlin, what about you?
So I joined ALBA after attending an event in Perth.
Perth seems to be the genesis of lots of people joining the party.
When I attended, it was an event that was open to members and supporters, and I went along with my friend who also was very pro-independence. The two of us went along and we just loved listening to Alex and just felt so inspired when we left. And I think that was such a big change from how we had been feeling before. We were a bit feeling a bit low about independence as a whole, because we'd lost so much confidence in what the SNP were doing, and so just to kind of go there and be like revitalised and get some of that energy back that we had in 2014, really made us want to join when we left. So the first thing we did was we became members that evening when we left after the event, which was great. And having met Alex the first time again was at the Independence March last year, and I was watching so many people during the march approach Alex and say, you know, introduce themselves and say hello, and I felt, you know, that I had saw him take part in the march for some distance, and I hadn't quite plucked up the courage to say hello, and kindly one of the other ALBA Youth members introduced me to him, and I think my face was so red in the photo that I had to edit it right down, but I was absolutely ecstatic to have met him. It was great.
And I know we met you again, of course, Caitlin, you're a teacher, I should say, a biology teacher, and we met you on the campaign trail when you were campaigning for Neil Hanvey in Kirkcaldy and Cowdenbeath on another beautiful day in July last year. And I know we had a lot of fun because it was the launch of the Youth Manifesto in which we're involved. It was a very important part, and I think having a Youth Manifesto as we work towards 2026 will be really important. I mean, have you, as ALBA Youth, let's branch it out to a bit of sort of plans for the future, have you started to think about what an ALBA Youth Manifesto needs to look like?
We did have a chat about it. I've got a couple of ideas, but it's more, we've not came up with anything solid. I've got a couple of ideas myself, mainly from experience in my own area. Right. Like, for example, youth services, there's a lot of them that are approaching breaking point. It's protecting those kind of things because young people need them. It keeps them out of trouble. It helps them develop as people. I used it.
And you're a young dad. Exactly.
My little girl's no doubt going to use them.
How old's your little one?
She's 1. She's nearly walking. I get sent a video today of her standing for the first time.
Tell me you did not miss her for, oh gosh.
She's standing for the first time. She's not walking yet. I will not be happy if I miss that, but she can lie to me and say she hasn't walked yet, and I'll be happy with that. You're
looking at this very much from the perspective as a very young man, a dad of a little 1-year-old, and thinking about services you need now and also for her in the future, no doubt.
Yeah, these are the services that I grew up on. It's no doubt going to be services that other kids grow up on, and it's services that parents rely on as well. Because not everybody's got, they might have kids, but they've got jobs, they've got careers, they've got lives. A youth club helps. It gets them socialising, keeps them out of trouble. Things like Y Sorted in my local area, absolutely brilliant. I came up in Y Sorted. There used to be a Y Sorted van just in my local area. You go in, talk to people, play games, just interact with other kids. It keeps them engaged, keeps them, you know, it helps with their manners as well. They teach you things you wouldn't necessarily learn otherwise. There's something I think ALBA Youth should aim to protect, is amongst other things, obviously independence being a massive priority. Just campaigning for that in general as well.
Of course, we did have the policy of free sports facilities for under 18s, and obviously you'll be able to work together to build on the manifesto for an offering for young people and beyond, obviously, because young people inform the debate. And all of you were obviously involved in the 2014 referendum campaign. Owen, of course, you were but a babe in arms. So that would mean, how old were you?
7.
You were 7. So you have only ever known a nationalist government.
Yep.
In the Scottish Parliament. So I take it your aim is to keep it that way.
Definitely. Hopefully for a supermajority.
For a supermajority. Now you were, I'm going to say famously because we're going to show a clip now, on debate night questioning the credentials of a unionist politician. Let's take a look at that clip.
Let's go to our second question of the night, which comes from Owen Gallagher. Owen, evening.
If Anis Sarwar promised no austerity under Labour, how can he then justify the severe welfare cuts now being planned?
So tell me, you were in that debate night audience, were you anxious to ask the question? First time on telly?
It was my first time on TV, so I was very anxious, especially these like flying mics above your head at debate night. So you can't stand up if you agree with something or you get smacked in the head. So you have to submit all these questions, and I got picked out of 200 questions, but fair enough, I probably submitted 100 myself. Yeah, it was the day after the speculations of cutting welfare for those in benefits and those that were on PIP and stuff. So it was targeted towards the disabled, and my question was, how can a government that's meant to be for the working class people targeting the people that can't even look after themselves? And then Monica Lennon just couldn't answer the question, could she? She had to say, oh, it's just speculations. Next day, budget announced, and it was true.
And there it was. So Monica Lennon being the Scottish Labour MSP. Tell me, I mean, you're saying that you submitted. Are you doing modern studies and advanced higher modern studies?
I did modern studies last year. I was close to getting the highest mark in Scotland, 4 marks off, but then higher politics this year.
Is everybody at your school as engaged? I mean, you don't know about everybody, obviously, at school, but do you get the impression that everyone is engaged in politics as you are?
Yeah, definitely. I would say modern studies is probably one of the most popular subjects within my school. People in my school are engaged in politics for lots of reasons, mainly now about independence and Palestine, which is why I think it's amazing that we are standing up against this genocide that's happening in Palestine.
We, of course, the ALBA party have absolutely said there's a genocide going on in Palestine. Now, you were a student of modern studies, you're doing advanced higher
History.
The advanced higher history, and you're doing politics now, politics higher, I think, in 6th year. But you performed really well, did you not, in your exams last year?
Yeah, I got 4 A's and a B, so I'm into the University of Glasgow.
And what are you going to study at Glasgow?
History and politics.
History and politics, great. So let's talk about history for a moment. Let's start with you. When you did history at school, were you taught anything about Scottish history?
Very little. For Nat 5 and higher, it was a third of the course, and it was on the era of Great War, so that was the Scots' contribution to World War I. So there wasn't really anything in terms of Scotland before being part of the Union.
So you've concentrated now, what is it, on...
the American Civil War.
American Civil War, which must be quite interesting given that we've just had a very interesting presidential election. Yeah,
definitely. For my advanced higher English folio, what I've actually done was talk about the 2024 presidential election and see how that's went into a civil war as a creative piece of writing.
Okay, good luck with that. Christopher, were you taught anything about Scottish history at school?
Not as much as I would have liked to have been. I only done National 5 history, so we essentially get taught about the Scottish Wars of Independence. We weren't taught about how Scotland came to be a part of the Union, Scotland's role in the Industrial Revolution, anything like that, or the World Wars. It was essentially just, your stereotypical William Wallace, Robert the Bruce, Battle of Bannockburn, Battle of Falkirk, those kind of things. It wasn't necessarily a deep dive into Scotland, it was more glazed over. Yes, which I find a bit odd considering we're in Scotland, but that's unfortunately just what teachers are told to teach essentially. But it's not a great history. We don't actually learn very much about our country.
So you're taking your information from where?
From Google books. My granddad was quite the history man, so he had a lot of different books that I was fortunate enough to have access to. Nowadays, of course, it's Wikipedia and whatever.
And we'll come on to that because I'm very keen to discuss with you how you get your information. Caitlin, obviously you're a teacher of biology. You may not necessarily know at your school, if Scottish history is part of a major part of the curriculum through the years. But do you think it's important to understand the history of Scotland in a context of moving forward in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I know that there is still teaching on the Scottish Wars of Independence, although I couldn't go into depth on the history curriculum myself. Although I do remember when I was at school learning about the Highland clearances, but not really having any context as to how we got to that point or why the Highland clearances actually happened. So I remember actually taking some history home, and I think it was maybe my mum or dad, and just telling them what we had been doing, whether it was homework or something I was doing. And we had been learning basically that during the Highland clearances that people were moved to make way for sheep farming because large areas of land were needed for sheep farming, and then therefore there were more people coming to the central belt and the cities, and then we studied what impact did that have on the living conditions in the cities, and most of your exam was about actually the living conditions in the cities, about overcrowding, but none of it was actually about the context of how did that all come to be. So there was no context of what the Highland clearances actually were or why they came about or the suffering that any Scottish people and the suffering that our Scottish culture endured as well. So I think definitely in an independent Scotland more consideration should be given to that.
And we're going to take a short break and we're going to come back to a bit of the spirit of 2014 that I want to discuss with you and how important that's going to be for next year's election. So we'll see you all after the break.
Water is life, but not all water is equal. Our water ionizer restructures and alkalizes water for optimum hydration and detoxification, recreating the planet's ultimate water sources, found in lightning-struck lakes and newly melted icebergs. H2 Pure Source. Change your water. Change your life.
Welcome back to Scotland Speaks, where I'm delighted to be joined by Owen, Kristopher and Caitlin, where we're talking all things young people and independence. Let's stay with 2014 for a moment, because Kristopher, you must have been about, I'm working out, teenager?
I was 12. I was 13 right before.
Were you aware of what?
Yeah.
Was there debates at school about it?
I've got a good story about Jackie Baillie, actually.
Go on, let's hear it. Dame Jackie Baillie, if you please.
Dame Manor. She was going door to door in Bon Hill. Famously, she put an article in the Reporter saying that if we go independent, your bread will go up by £1 or so. Obviously, nowadays, your bread is up by more than £1 or so. However, at the time she was going round door to door, I'd literally just got in from school and she tapped my granddad's door. I used to go to my granny and my granddad's after school just because my dad was at work. She was talking to my granddad and my granny, who were at the time soft nosed about their pensions and how they would lose them in an independent country. Me and my brother Graham have always been for independence. So we've actually asked, all right, cool, so how does it work if you move to Canada? And she went, what do you mean? I was like, so if I decide to work here for 20 years, Jackie, and when I'm 35 or whatever, I move to Canada, do I lose my pension? She went, no, you've contributed to the tax system in the UK, so you'll be entitled to your pension. And I was like, right, so I was like, so why is my granddad, who's worked for 55 years, not entitled to his pension if Scotland goes independence? He contributed to the UK tax system. She didn't have an answer for it.
And this is you at the age of 13 questioning her?
Aye, and my brother was essentially at the point of, if you're going to lie, make it a good one. And my brother actually had the wee blue book from Wings Over Scotland.
Yes.
He gave that to my granddad, and that was enough to sway him over to the yes side. My gran was, of course, she was scared enough by the pensions.
And let's not glaze over that point. It's worth saying again that the wee blue book contributed greatly to people who had the opportunity to get hold of one and then read it, to bringing people over. And it's interesting that your granddad came across after reading it.
I think it helped for a lot of people as well.
You must tell Revs too.
I don't even know where my brother got that wee blue book from, because I had no clue it existed.
Well, they distributed thousands and thousands across Scotland. And Caitlin, I don't know if you've got one. I've got one of the lovely bound versions that I've kept. Did you get access to the
I didn't get a nice one, but I did have quite a few at one point, and I used to go into uni and leave them on the subway and just put stickers everywhere.
How important do you think it's going to be next year, where the ALBA party is saying from our perspective and encouraging the SNP and other independence parties that this needs to be the independence election? How important, therefore, do you think it is to invoke that spirit out on the street between now and then to let people know there is something worth voting for? Caitlin?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's pivotal in what we need to get young people involved. I don't think, while there's nothing happening, that young people are going to do things like attend meetings. Young people who are passionate about independence want to be out on the street doing something that's going to help us achieve independence. So yeah, absolutely, that spirit that was in the air, that atmosphere that was in the air in 2014 was almost contagious, because at the time I was just starting university, and that could be a whole new world on its own. But just like going into Glasgow and feeling the atmosphere and seeing the debates happening in the street and seeing the people rallying and mascots going around and people just having debates, and there was always something happening to try and at least raise a little bit of awareness that the referendum was happening. So it was just a whole different atmosphere to what we have at the moment. I think a lot of people have been worn down by some of the politics that's been going on. I know personally, myself and a lot of people that were very active in 2014 or just after 2014 because they were mobilised by the referendum, have lost a little bit of interest or a little bit of motivation. We've definitely reduced our pro-independence activists for certain, because I know a lot of people that are just not active within politics at all. But I know 100% if that independence campaign came around again, every one of them would be back out and doing things.
So you hit on the key point, Caitlin, which is this. First of all, the campaign, the summer of 2014 was pivotal, and Alex, God rest his soul, often said that he knew that was the key moment when things really changed for the Yes campaign, and we started to see, larger rises in support for independence. But a lot of that and people's involvement surely had something to do with the fact that there was a definitive date where the question would be asked. Therefore, coming to you, Kristopher, that's how important it is, surely, that we term this election in 2026, the list vote element of it, as the independence election element of it, surely to get people out to vote.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also agree with what Caitlin's saying. A lot of people aren't, it's not that they're not interested, it's just that they're not motivated. People need something to look forward to, like say, like a date where they can actually do something about it. I know a lot of people are just looking for hope. A lot of people don't have that at the minute. With making this an independence election, that gives a bit of hope to people, and people like me, people like my next door neighbours, my friends. I know people that aren't registered to vote that would register if they knew Scotland's future could head in a different direction. Many young people are like that. They just don't see the point because they've not got something to vote for yet. Hopefully we'll give them something to vote for. That's the plan, obviously. And we'll just need to convey that to the general public, and young people in particular in general, because a lot of these young people are like Caitlin was saying, they're not motivated, and they will get motivated if they've got something to vote for. It'll be getting them to register to vote first, which I think with in 2014, it was an incredible turnout. I think similar could happen again if done properly.
So when you identified your reason for joining ALBA, because you obviously agreed with the list vote ALBA strategy, you saw that as a way forward to independence. Obviously you're going to be advocating that in the 2026 elections, which is what our plan is, and that vote is for independence. Do you think that is going to engage young people into the campaign because it feels like it's for something definitive at the end of it?
Definitely. I think young people are disillusioned after voting year after year for the SNP, yet we're still in Westminster. So this is giving us an opportunity without going, here, gives another referendum, to actually say, no, we're voting independence and there's nothing you can do about it.
And use the ballot box test, which of course we know from the Supreme Court requires to be...
That provides legitimacy. So absolutely, I think that will get young people to vote. We just need to, probably through TikTok, is explain that strategy
Yes.
very well, and then I think...
Well, let's tease out a bit, because I attend a lot of meetings. In fact, I've attended every meeting, I think, since ALBA's inception as a member of the National Executive Committee and Party Chair. But at those meetings, often we get questions from the audience in the public meetings where they say, we're concerned there aren't lots of young people in the room. Do you think that should be a concern for us, or do you think it's more the case that young people have got other things to do of an afternoon, may have already made up their mind, or are taking their information from elsewhere?
I don't think it's a concern. I think most young people are busy, they're going out with their friends, studying for exams, and then when they're actually there alone time, they don't want to go to meetings, they just want to go on TikTok and just see a wee 30-second video.
So TikTok you've mentioned, so let's talk about strategy then for 2026 and engaging with young people, which you're brilliant examples of. And indeed, Kristopher, let's talk about your by-election also and engaging with the electorate. Do you think that politicians, young and old, need to be appealing to the electorate, young and old, via social media and via TikTok?
Absolutely. It's the news of today, I suppose. We know that papers, like your physical copies of the newspapers, they're selling less every single year. That's not because people are sitting watching BBC News. That's because people are opening up their social media and getting their news straight from that. It's less bias. There's a hell of a lot more exposure on there, and they can give their opinion, and other people can talk to you about that. It gets engagement that way. If you've ever looked at a Facebook comment section, sometimes it's a bin fire, and sometimes it's absolutely brilliant. It just depends what kind of information's on display. So I think social media does need to be utilised. I've seen some incredible graphics from the ALBA page on Facebook and on Twitter, explaining how the haunt works on the list. And that did get actually a lot of engagement. And I think there needs to be more of that, especially on TikTok as well. It's one of those things where TikTok can be a bit daunting to get onto for new creators, I suppose. But as a political party, I think it's essential, especially if you want to expose yourself to the younger vote, given that Facebook, sure, they use it, but they're not on it the same way they're on TikTok. Same goes for Twitter. Most people are on Twitter for a laugh. Most people are on TikTok for a laugh.
I'm not sure if they're on X for a laugh. Sometimes it can be quite a horrible place to be.
It can be quite horrible, yeah, but
it's one place to put you on politics. Caitlin, as a teacher, you must see a lot of your pupils often drifting off into, I'm sure not in their biology lessons with you, but obviously it's a tool widely used by young people.
Yeah, absolutely. All young people, I couldn't say 100%, but definitely the vast majority of young people are using social media. They are using, like, watching videos on TikTok or videos on Instagram that are short and that are snappy. And to be honest with you, I don't know whether I agree with it completely overall, because it is to do with shortening of the attention span, because the videos are really, really short. So actually it's a bit of a shame that people are not going and delving into more information. However, if you put that information out there on social media where it's easily accessible and people can see it easily, it's going to get your message out quite far and wide, especially to younger people that are using TikTok a lot. But it also might trigger them to look more into the ALBA party and find out more about what ALBA's policies are, find out more about ALBA's strategy to achieve independence. And if young people can be confident in that strategy, I mean, it's not as if there's anything currently that's going to be able to challenge that, because here we are more than 10 years after the referendum and we're still not independent. So it could only be a good thing.
So can we, Owen, expect some videos from you on TikTok?
Yeah, definitely. I think we just need to reiterate a message that we can do this through the ballot box. We don't need to ask for another referendum. And also our other stances on things like Palestine, because that will definitely appeal to the young people.
Thank you. And Kristopher, now you are putting yourself forward for election, and it must be tough. You're a young dad, you've got a little girl, yet I am presuming that you feel really strongly about what's happening in your local area, which is why you put yourself forward. So tell us where you're standing, what ward you're standing in, when the election is, what you're campaigning on.
Yeah, so I'm standing in the Clydebank Waterfront by-election. It's on May the 15th. There's a number of issues I'm standing on, I suppose. When it comes to Western Bartonshire, it was a Labour majority, now it's a Labour minority supported by 2 independent, former Labour, so basically Labour majority. And I am standing on the basis of stopping nonsense politics, essentially. Like, just for example, they upped the council tax in our area by 11.5%. I know that's not the worst in the country, but it's still a stark increase. They gave themselves a 21% pay rise. Why? They gave the council workers the option of a 3% pay rise. Why? What makes them entitled to 21%? They also want to reduce bin collections to once every 3 weeks. Now, I come from a council estate, I live on a council estate, have done my entire life. 2 weeks is stretching it. 3 weeks is too long. There will be dirt on the streets. Kids playing that. I know people are like, oh, kids are always on their Xbox. No, kids still play outside. That is not good, that's not healthy. You will see rises in disease in the area, and that inadvertently affects people later on in life as well. There's also other small niggly things like putting a £50 licence on your brown bin to get it collected. That's ridiculous, it's a bin. You pay to have the bin in the first place.
Some of us in Glasgow are already facing all of that.
Yeah, and that's for the SNP and the Greens.
But these things really matter to people, and it's good to see that you've alighted on things that are actually meaningful to people. And local elections are very important for this reason. Sometimes people sort of neglect the importance of them, and it's great to see that. Well, all the very best in your campaign. So it's an STV election, so single transferable vote. You're looking for people to give you their number one preference, which is of course a different system to the Scottish parliamentary election of next year, which has an entirely different system, which is what we'll be talking about in next week's show of Scotland Speaks. But for now, I think ALBA Youth and the youth of the ALBA Party, and indeed the youth of Scotland, are in very safe hands if you three are an indication of the representation we can look forward to in the future. So Owen, Kristopher and Caitlin, thank you so much for joining me on Scotland Speaks, and all the very best in your exam. I'm sure you'll shine.
Thank you.
And with that, we come to the end of this week's show. And as I've said, next week we're actually going to be talking about the Scottish parliamentary elections. What is the voting system all about? What do the ballot papers look like? And what is the ALBA Party asking you to do to maximise the independence vote? We'll see you all next week.